Hello and welcome to today's Align and Refine tutorial on Cobra. Cobra is such a great posture for lengthening our spine, strengthening our spine, opening the front top of the chest. Today I'll teach you a few different variations of Cobra to practice. And so the only prop that you will need is a block and your mat. That's it. Today you will learn what the priorities are in the pose. You'll learn how to practice the pose well. And for those of you that are teachers, you'll learn verbal cues and different ways to teach the pose that's most appropriate for your students and what they need. So grab your mat, grab your block, and we'll work Cobra Pose. Such a great posture for our everyday posture, and really so necessary to learn and practice well before being able to move on to other back bends in your yoga practice, like upward facing dog. So get yourself set up and we'll get started. To begin, set your block off to the side. We'll use it in a few moments. And we really need to start by discussing variations of Cobra Pose, the benefits of Cobra Pose, and also the priority in Cobra Pose. So I'll start with the priority. It's good to know in any posture for our own practice and in our teaching what the priority in the pose is. What is this pose about? Why do we do it? So Cobra Pose is a back bend. That means that it is enlivening. It means it opens the front of the spine. It means it gives us energy. For some people, they'd call back bends heart openers, which can also be emotionally opening to give and receive energetically for many people. And in Cobra, like bridge pose, the main physical priority that we're looking for is to open the front top of the chest and to lengthen and decompress the spine in order to back bend a little more in your mid and your upper back. So the priority is not just one thing. The priority is opening the front top of the chest, again, lengthening and decompressing the spine, and getting extension, more length, and a little bit of back bend in the mid and the upper back. And then the other benefits of Cobra include things like lengthening our quadriceps, lengthens our hip flexors, can lengthen our psoas, can be a strengthener for our spine depending on the type of variation that we do of Cobra. It can definitely work and be a strengthener for our triceps and a stretch for our abdominal muscles and the front of the chest. So in Cobra Pose, it is really about the whole body working from our toes all the way up through lengthening our neck. The body working in different ways to lengthen. But the real point of Cobra on a physical level is to open the front top of the chest, lengthen and decompress the spine, and get extension and a back bend into the mid and the upper back. And then within the pose, people will feel a stretch and people will feel work in a different way, just depending on their body. Now, for those of you that are teachers, it's important to sequence Cobra Pose, practicing and teaching Cobra Pose before getting to upward facing dog in a sequence. Now, traditionally, Cobra Pose is a small back bend. I would say that it should be a small back bend because sequentially and in our learning process, if we know how to practice Cobra Pose well, and if it's earlier on in a sequence, it's going to warm up and teach the body to practice upward facing dog well. So Cobra is oftentimes within a sun salutation of various sorts. And Cobra Pose, therefore, is taught near the beginning of a class before moving into upward facing dog. Because again, it warms up the body and teaches the body the joint and muscle actions that the body needs to do in upward facing dog and be prepared for in upward facing dog. So think of Cobra as small. And that is one of the most challenging things about Cobra Pose. And I'll demonstrate, messing it up quite a bit today. One of the most challenging things about Cobra Pose is the fact that most people can make it a deeper back bend, push themselves up away from the floor, and getting our brain and our body and our thinking to back off of that and keep Cobra small is one of the biggest challenges. Because just because we can do something, remember, it doesn't mean that we should. Just because you can come up higher in Cobra and maybe it feels really good, doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be appropriate for other people. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're then warming up your spine in the safest way to go deeper later on in class. So keeping Cobra small can be incredibly challenging, especially when it feels good to make Cobra bigger. And remember, there is a time and place for everything, and there's not one way to do it. But remember, during the beginning of class through sun salutes, you want to teach Cobra and practice Cobra before upward facing dog. And hopefully over time, students learn and start to appreciate Cobra Pose before just jumping into up dog. Because if you just jump and dive into up dog and don't ever practice Cobra, you probably don't have a lot of flexibility in your mid-back, and you may not be getting the benefits of the chest opening once you get to upward dog if you haven't learned Cobra first. Okay, so again, lots of ways to practice this pose, and it's going to feel different on different people. What's going to feel good to one person doesn't necessarily feel good to someone else. So know that there's that gray area. There's always that gray area. I wish it was more simple than that, but it's not. So first thing about Cobra that I'd like to address is just as a little reminder about any back bend, all right? Any back bend. Back bends are enlivening. They can give us energy. And when we back bend, we want to lengthen our spine and decompress our spine. That's what makes back bending well somewhat of a challenge. So simply what I mean, I'm going to make a fool of myself from the side here. If I were to sit here and simply relax everything, this is compression. And really nice posture. I'm kidding. This is compression, where I'm using literally as little muscle effort as humanly possible to keep myself from falling onto the floor. So everything's relaxed. My stomach's relaxed. My shoulders are relaxed. If I really completely relax my neck, my head would do this. My spinal muscles are relaxed. And when we relax everything, that adds, with gravity, compression to our hips and our spine. Now, compression and relaxing everything isn't bad, but during a pose like Cobra, we do not want to compress our spine and our hips. So, simply put, decompressing our spine would look like this. I can simply think of reaching the crown of the head straight up towards the sky, as if I'm holding the ceiling up with my long, strong spine. And when I reach the crown of my head straight up towards the sky, my spinal muscles, my abdominals, my shoulder muscles, my neck muscles, they're actually all working, which means they're getting stronger, in what's called an eccentric way. Eccentric contraction means that those muscles are working as they're lengthening. And that's what we want to do in a back bend. If I were to just contract my abdominal muscles and round my spine, this is a different kind of contraction. My abdominal muscles are getting shorter and stronger. If I reach the crown of my head straight up towards the sky, some of the muscles that have to work are my abdominals, but they're contracting and working as they're lengthening. And that's an ideal type of contraction to have, an eccentric contraction to have in our posture practice, in our asana practice. Because when we eccentrically contract our muscles, we are decompressing in our joints. And time and age and gravity and computering and sitting compress us. So we want to do as much as possible to decompress. We want to decompress, eccentrically lengthen as we back bend. In almost every single back bend, we want to eccentrically use our spinal muscles and our abdominals so that we're decompressing our spine as we back bend. Now, another example here of if I were to back bend now and not decompress, it would perhaps look like this. Like my pelvis, I could just tilt it forward. I could thrust my chest back and look up. And right now, I'm using very little muscle effort. If I were to use even less muscle effort, my head would drop back like this. Not healthy for the neck, ever. Don't do that. So right now, my spinal muscles are shortened. The muscles in the back of my neck are shortened. I'm compressing my back body. We don't ever want to back bend like that. The difference between this kind of back bend, this is compression, and this kind of back bend. I'm going to reach up to the crown of my head first, and then think of lifting my upper back, my shoulders, my head up over a barrel that's behind me. So I'm using muscle effort as I back bend. I'm decompressing as I back bend, as opposed to back bending like this. Don't practice that on yourself too often. I don't want you to hurt yourself. So when we back bend, we want to lengthen and then back bend, and especially in Cobra. So I'm going to show you on your stomach here, and you can do this with me, but do it gently. I don't want you to leave with a backache. That's why Cobra is so tricky, because if someone has the strength, the flexibility to simply press the floor away and come up with their arms straight, part of our brain just says, well, if I can do this, why wouldn't I just come up as high as possible, right? Just because we can do something, remember, doesn't mean we should. So this is how a lot of people practice Cobra. They just press the floor away, they lift their chest, and what this does is it compresses and dumps us into our lower back. It compresses the spine. Most people that do Cobra this way, their shoulders do something like this, so that's not opening the front of the chest. So therefore, the spine is compressed and the front of the chest is not opening. I'm going to come out of this and show from the side again. Our lumbar spine, our lower back, is already by nature in a back bend. It's in what's called extension. That is the natural way that our lower back curves, hopefully. Our mid-back, our thoracic spine, is in actually a little bit of flexion. And then our cervical spine, our neck, this curve mirrors our lumbar curve. So in Cobra Pose, we're trying to get a little bit of extension in our mid-back. And if you simply press the floor away with your hands and press into your lower back in Cobra, the lower back ends up back bending too much, and the mid-back remains stiff and unmoving. Now our mid-back, literally the vertebrae and the discs are not designed to back bend as much as our lumbar spine or our cervical spine. In fact, our mid-back, the thoracic area, is only designed to back bend, technically called extension, to about 5 degrees. And that's because the thoracic spine, those vertebrae are shaped differently. I'm going to grab the skeleton now. Yes, he's a little, he's been around, shoved in suitcases and stuff, so he has some issues. But I just would like you to look at his thoracic spine here. He's all twisted. His thoracic spine, these are the green vertebrae. There's 12 of them. This is your mid-back. And what's poking out here, facing you, are all of these little bony protrusions called your spinous processes. Your spinous processes, if you hug your knees into your chest and you roll on your back, your spinous processes are what you can feel pressing into the mat. Sometimes for some people it's pretty uncomfortable. That's your spinous processes. And you can see from this spine here, These spinous processes in the thoracic spine, they are long and they're also angled down. So if you imagine all these little bony protrusions then trying to backbend in this area, you can imagine from the shape of these vertebrae, these processes, that our thoracic spine just does not backbend that much. Structurally, it's not designed to. So we're only designed for about 5 degrees of spinal extension in our mid-back. So keep in mind that your mid-back is never going to backbend as much as your neck or your lower back. But Cobra Pose is one of the main postures that we practice to help us get some extension in our thoracic spine. It's not going to be as much as the neck or the lower back, but we still want to extend the mid-back as much as it's designed for. Okay, so on to the stomach again. So if you come up into Cobra Pose and just press the floor away and dump into your lower back, it's not that back bending in your lower back is bad. It's designed for it, but it keeps our mid-back stuck, unmoving, without lengthening and decompressing the spine. Doing Cobra in this way, you're going to compress those muscles and the intervertebral discs of your lower back, which can definitely cause injury with time, I know from experience. And usually if you come up this high in Cobra Pose, your shoulders round forward, you're not opening the chest and not using the muscles of your upper back and between the shoulder blades. So then you ask, all right, so how should we do it instead? So with hand position in Cobra, if you're teaching a group class or just getting someone started in Cobra Pose, I would suggest instructing everyone to take the hands a little bit wider than shoulder distance, so under the shoulders and slightly wider. Most people think their shoulders are more narrow than they are, and so people keep their hands way in close like this, and then they won't be able to open the front top of the shoulders. So take your hands under your shoulders and then slightly wider apart. Now look at your hands and turn your pointer finger forward. And just like you would in plank pose, you want to gently spread your fingers, gently press down between the thumb and the index finger, and then just find that little clawing with your fingertips, okay? Now as you breathe here into your side ribs, first start to use your triceps to begin to pull your chest forward as if you could slide yourself off of your mat. And now widen your collarbone. So in other words, bring your shoulder blades a little closer together on your back. And continue to use your triceps, the backs of your arms, to literally try to drag yourself forward off of the mat. So this is one place to start. On an exhale, release your chest and just press back to your knees, stretch it back into child's pose. So literally, Cobra, if my hands are shoulder distance and then slightly wider, I first widen the front top of the chest, or bring the shoulder blades a little closer together, and then think of using triceps, the backs of the arms, to try to slide myself forward off the mat. So Cobra Pose is literally, if we're seated, it's just this. It's very small. And yes, most people can do this and dump into their lower back, but then it's no longer Cobra. It's no longer healthy or safe either, and it defeats the purpose of the pose. So again, start with hands shoulder distance and then a little slightly wider. That will allow people to open the front top of the chest, and then use triceps to try to drag yourself forward off of your mat. So we'll just do that one more time. Lots of other cues that we can use, but we haven't gotten there yet. So hands shoulder distance, and then take your hands slightly wider. Gently spread your fingers, little gripping in the fingertips. Now as you breathe here, first bring your shoulder blades a little closer together on your back. Notice I did not say all the way together, and I did not say squeeze. And then use your triceps to try to drag yourself forward off of your mat. Take another breath here. Now, if you can do this gently or just watch me, notice if I just start to press the floor away, I'm going to dump into my back and I'm going to lose that extension in the mid-back. So again, this is what we will do. This is human nature to come up high. The challenge is staying low so that we are getting more of the work in this mid-back area and getting extension in that thoracic spine. Now release here. The further you walk your hands back toward your side waist in Cobra, the more it will back bend into your lower back. Again, that's not bad. You just don't ever want to feel compression in your lower back. And the further toward your side waist your hands go, the harder it is to keep the front top of the chest open. So let's experiment with that a little bit. If your hands are shoulder height and a little wider, and you can open the front top of your chest. Now slide your hands toward your side waist just an inch. Elbows reach straight back. So not here, because that rounds the front of the shoulders forward, but elbows reach straight back. And then you bring your shoulder blades a little closer together again on your back. Sometimes I'll say lift the front of your shoulders up away from the floor. And then use your triceps again to try to pull yourself forward and up. Notice how that feels. And then place your chest down. And if you can keep the front of your shoulders open and walk your hands back another inch, try that. Lift the front of your shoulders up away from the mat. Elbows reach straight back. Use your triceps to try to drag yourself forward and up. Then release. Now I keep my chest a little bit high while demonstrating this because I do have a mic in the way. So I'm kind of staying in a mini cobra the whole time, but you release your chest all the way to the mat. And then walk your hands back until your forearms are straight up and down. Lift your shoulders up away from the floor. Bring your shoulder blades closer together. Elbows reach straight back. And again, use your triceps to pull your chest forward and up. And release down. Now place your hands under your shoulders again. Lift your navel, press to your knees, and stretch your hips back to child's pose. So know that in Cobra Pose, and it's important to know, okay, what's good for the masses? What am I going to teach generally to an entire class? In Cobra, start with hands under the shoulders and a little wider. Place people's hands where they can open the front tops of the shoulders. So just like any posture where we are weight bearing on our hands, it's really about what's going on in the upper torso, in the spine, and in the shoulder girdle. Where to place your hands, that doesn't matter as much. Some people need to place their hands very wide in Cobra Pose. Some people need to place their hands forward in Cobra in order to open the front tops of the shoulders and the chest. So it's not about, well, where should I place my hands? What's correct? What's correct is where can you place your hands that allows you to open the front top of your shoulders and your chest. So again, for some people, that means that their hands need to be wide and perhaps slightly turned out like this. For some people, placing the hands forward allows them to widen their chest and use their triceps more. So you can see that there are only about 1,000 different hand options depending on your arms, your shoulders, your spine. What we're going for is where can we place our hands so that I can open the front top of my chest and use my triceps to pull forward. So experiment with that a few times. Hands under your shoulders, perhaps hands wider. When I place my hands too far forward, I can't use my triceps as well, but some people can use them better. And it's all dependent on your body and your musculature and your dimensions. So these are all good places to place the hands for Cobra Pose. Again, priority is open the front top of the chest, use the triceps and decompress the spine. That sense of trying to drag yourself forward off the mat, if you've got those things going on, then hands placed wherever hands need to be placed. And for a little more challenge, if you can keep the front of the chest open, hands can go more towards the side waist. If someone's shoulders start to do this, defeats the purpose, okay? So hands are placed where you can draw the shoulders up away from the floor, where you can bring your shoulder blades a little closer together, and where you have leverage to use your triceps in order to drag yourself forward to decompress the spine. So, experiment with your hand placement, and it can change, right? So maybe first Cobra, you place your hands one spot. Then the next Cobra, you place your hands further forward. Then the next Cobra, you take your hands a little bit wider. It will change a little bit of where the back bend is in your mid-back, and it'll change a little bit of what area of your triceps you're using, right? And they're all good. So feel free to play with variety as long as you keep the front top of your chest open. Now, so you're going to play with your hand placement. You know where to place your hands for the shoulder placement. First go off of this. Now some of the other cues, I'm going to go back down now to the feet. Excuse my feet, they're not cute. This is a really good teachable moment to do once in a while with your class, is using a block for Cobra. So first I'm going to show you what happens in the feet in Cobra Pose oftentimes. So in Cobra, oftentimes if people externally rotate their legs and their thighs, which you know then usually compresses the lower back. If people externally rotate their their thighs, knees, and then their feet, it'll look like this. All right, so we want to avoid this, where the heels are closer together than the balls of the feet. We also want to avoid the heels splaying out like this, especially for people that tend to already supinate. If a student already tends to roll out like this when they walk or they stand or in their standing posture practice, we really want to avoid this in Cobra Pose and in every back bend. Because if you see people's feet in Cobra and upward facing dog and their feet are doing this, that means many things, but they're not helpful. It means that the outer ankle and outer muscles of the calf, what are called your perineal muscles, are getting not necessarily overstretched, but they're weakening, okay? And that means that they're not working, they're not going to support the outer ankle, and they're not supporting your outer knee. It also means if the heels and the feet are splaying out like that the inner thighs don't have to do their job. And our inner thigh muscles are always somehow getting out of doing their job and working. So in Cobra Pose and in upward facing dog and in locust, we want to be in mountain posture from our thigh to our knee, through the lower leg, middle of the ankle, and out the center of the foot. Just as if you were in mountain pose, except you're on your stomach and the foot is in plantar flexion. So if the foot's in plantar flexion, like this, if you're seated, that's exactly how you want your feet in Cobra Pose. And again, you don't want them like this, and you don't want them like this. And that's where the block comes in really handy. So I'm going to show you first where to place the block. Now the block this medium height is good for most people. Obviously it depends on the length of your foot, the size of your foot. Some people might need 2 blocks. Depending on the width of your torso, some people might need a block and a quarter, something like this, so that it's not too narrow. Most people work well with the block, this low height and this medium width. Okay, so this is what you'll do on your stomach in a moment. I'm showing you with my knees bent. So I'm going to hold the block with my inner ankle bones. And I'm holding the block with that inner part of my metatarsal. Now notice that I'm not allowing my inner ankle bones to come off the block. That would be sickling and overstretching the outer ankle and outer shin. I'm also not holding the block with my heels. That would mean that my feet and my thighs are turning out. So it's very specific. And at first, you may not be able to hold the block with just the inner ankle bones. And that's the practice. It may not happen right away. So you're going to come onto your stomach now and use the block, that medium width between your inner ankles. And again, you may need a longer block or a little bit wider a block. And I'm just going to come up onto my elbows to start here. So I'm more in a Sphinx pose just as I talk you through it. So as I reach back through my feet are about thigh distance apart. So thighs, knees, feet are about hip bone distance apart. I'm going to first internally rotate my thighs a little bit. And then as I spread my toes, notice if your little toe, that little toe side of your foot doesn't reach the floor, that's okay. So much of that depends on the shape of your foot and not necessarily the muscles that you're using or not using. So you're first going to spread your toes. And if you've ever heard that cue of press all 10 toenails down, I would suggest just let it go. You don't need it anymore. It doesn't apply to a lot of people and it'll make you sickle. So you're going to spread your toes and first don't press the tops of your feet down because that'll make you hyperextend your knees. So let go of that one. You're going to reach back through all 10 toes. So you get that lengthening aspect first and then try to hold the block with just your inner ankle bones. So not your heels and not so that the inner ankle bones are off the block, but try for just the inner ankle bones. And now press your thighs down and press your pubic bone down. So you are lifting your navel up away from the mat a little bit. Think of pressing your pubic bone down and your lower back will still be in a little bit of a natural curve. Probably your pelvis will be more in what's called neutral, which is good. As opposed to, you don't need to completely flatten out your lower back, right? The lower back is designed to have a little curve. So you just want to press your thighs down and press your pubic bone down enough that you feel that little lift in the front of the pelvis and so that you feel a little length in your lower back. Remember, we're going for length, not compression. Now keep that and then place your hands where you want them, where the front top of the chest is open. Use your triceps to try to drag yourself forward. And you may notice that, say like, oh, but Jamie, it's so much easier to come up higher. I know, that's why it's hard. You want to stay low enough so you're using your triceps to try to pull yourself forward. And then just sense that all 4 sides of your neck are long. So you don't need to look way forward and pinch the back of your neck. You don't need to drop your head completely. But think of all 4 sides of the neck long as an extension of your spine. So that the neck curve is an extension of the mid-back curve. Then release your chest. Lift your stomach. Press to your knee, stretch it back into child's pose or a down dog. Now, most of the time, I would say there's a few things that happen in Cobra that are really common. One is that people don't get the opening in the front top of the chest. And then they do Cobra like this, however many thousands of times. Or then they start doing up dog and they do up dog like this, however many thousands of times. And they come up too high. That's our other tendency in Cobra, is that we push the floor away and we come up too high, which then doesn't give us the opening in the front of the chest. It compresses our lower back and it does nothing to strengthen and lengthen our mid-back. So remember, that's what Cobra is all about. So resist the temptation to come up high. And I would encourage you as teachers to use language and talk about Cobra as Cobra is a small back bend. One of the challenging parts about Cobra is to keep Cobra low. One of the challenging parts, or if you want to challenge yourself, keep Cobra small. right? Because everybody wants to be challenged. So they're like, oh, well, if I'm challenging myself when I keep it small, I want to take the harder way. Cobra is a small back bend. And continue to emphasize that. This is a small back bend. It's not about pressing the floor away as much as possible. If you really want to challenge yourself in this back bend, keep it small and use your triceps more. Things like that to encourage them to not just press the floor away. So I'm going to talk through the cues again on my stomach in Cobra Pose. Obviously, like usual, you will not use all of these cues all of the time. You will use some of these cues depending on what the priority is that day in your class, or depending on what you see needs to be said that day in your class. All right, so come onto your stomach. Let's say you're using the block again. Again, you would just use this, let's say, once in a while for a teachable moment in class. Obviously, it's difficult to do in a flow practice. So let's say once a month you stop and you teach Cobra like this so people know how to use their feet and their legs. So first, everybody come down onto your stomach. You're going to hold the block between that inner metatarsal, that first metatarsal, and your inner ankle bone. Your heels are not touching the block, but do try to hold the block with the inner ankle bone. Now spread your toes and reach back through all 10 toes. Press your thighs down. And as you breathe here, press your pubic bone down gently. Lift your navel up away from the mat as if there's a little ice cube between your navel and the floor, and you really don't want to get your belly cold. Now place your hands a little wider than your shoulders. Lift the front of your shoulders up away from the floor as you bring your shoulder blades closer together. Keep breathing here, and then use your triceps to start to drag the front of your chest forward as if you could drag yourself off of your mat. Breathe into your side ribs. Continue to lift your navel up away from that ice cube. Notice what's going on in your feet. Try to spread your toes. And then notice how your neck feels. Make sure here that you could turn your head easily from side to side. One more breath. And release. Press to your knees. And just slide the block off to the side on all fours. Just shift your hips from side to side. Let your head drop. And you may want to take some little circles. And we're just going to move through that a couple of times, okay? So, from your half plank, on an exhale, lower to the mat. Place your hands a little wider than your shoulders. Lift your shoulders up away from the mat. Reach back through all 10 toes on an inhale. Pull forward and up into a mini cobra. And exhale down. Bring your hands in closer to your ribs. Lift your navel, press to your knees, and shut your hips back into child's pose. Take an inhale here. And exhale. On your next inhale, come up onto all fours again. Walk your hands a little forward, lower to the mat. Now a variation here, just notice how it feels in your shoulders and your hands. Come up onto your fingertips. Lift the front of your shoulders up away from the mat. Bring your shoulder blades closer together. Now press your pubic bone down. On an inhale, lift your chest. And exhale down. And place your palms flat. Lift in your stomach. Press to your knees. And stretch your hips back into child's pose. Just give a little wobble from side to side, a little sway from side to side. And then rise up. Okay, so going through the cues of Cobra. Here they are. You may want to write these down. Going through all the possible cues, not that you're going to use these all at once. All right? You're going to first, as you breathe, starting with the feet, you can have your feet hip bone distance apart or work with the legs closer together for more inner thigh strength, as long as that feels okay in the hips and the lower back. Now spread all 10 toes and reach back through all 10 toes. And I will oftentimes say, reach back through the big toe and the little toe side of your foot evenly so that people don't collapse in their inner ankle bones, and so they also don't sickle in their feet. Now as you reach back through all 10 toes and the big toe and the little toe side of your foot, press your thighs down, keep breathing, press your pubic bone down in order to lengthen in your lower back. Now as you breathe into your side ribs, have your hands shoulder distance apart or a little wider. Keep breathing as you lift the front of your shoulders up away from the floor. Bring your shoulder blades a little closer together on your back. Then on an inhale, use your triceps to try to pull your chest forward off of your mat. Stay here for a breath. Lengthen all four sides of your neck. And on an exhale, place your heart down. Lift in your stomach, press to your knees, and stretch your hips back into child's pose or down dog, wherever you're going from there. So sometimes the cue of pubic bone down helps people lengthen their lower back. Sometimes that analogy of the cold ice cube lifting up away from the floor helps people lengthen their lower back. You could also say, when it comes to the pelvis and the lower back, you can also say something like reach your sitting bones towards the backs of your knees. That keeps the lower back long also. And I would really avoid the cue of pressing the feet down. So if you press the tops of your feet down, which I know is a very common cue to use, but if people press the tops of their feet down, what it does is it hyperextends their knees. And anytime somebody hyperextends their knees, it dumps them into their lower back. So that's obviously not what we want to do. In my mountain pose tutorial, I discuss more about the language of how to unhyperextend the knees. But just know that here in Cobra Pose, if you reach back through all 10 toes and you tell people to press their thighs down, that will help to lengthen the lower back as opposed to pressing the tops of the feet down, which then dumps you into your lower back. All right? So try to work with that cue of reach back through all 10 toes as opposed to pressing the tops of the feet down. I'm going to do it one more time in the pose and go through cues one last time with you. Using your fingertips, always a nice option. Also, some people like knuckles, which I'll do this time. All right, so you're on your stomach. You reach back through all 10 toes, spread your toes open. And as you breathe here, press your thighs down. Find that little lift in the front of your pelvis, navel up away from the mat as if there's an ice cube between your navel and the mat. Press your pubic bone down. Now I'm going to be on my fists here, so making gentle fists. Elbows are bent back. I have my hands just about shoulder distance. Lift the front of the shoulders up away from the mat. Bring your shoulder blades closer together. And on an inhale, use your triceps to try to pull yourself forward and up. Now stay here an extra breath. Lengthen all four sides of your neck. Keep that lift in the front of your pelvis as you breathe into your side ribs. And on an exhale, place your heart down. Place the palms flat. Lift in your stomach, press to your knees, and stretch your hips back into child's pose. Take a breath in through your nose. And through your mouth, exhale. And slowly rise up. So remember here that you don't use every cue all the time. You pick and choose depending on what your theme is for that day. And you also pick and choose what cues you're using based on what you see the class needs. So you may come into class thinking you're going to be cueing about the front top of the chest and the shoulders opening that day. And then you get to class and everyone is squeezing their glutes and their feet are turned out. And so you think instead, all right, it's a good day to have that teachable moment, 1 to 3 minutes, and we're going to use a block today, right? So pick your cues, have a plan, and also be ready to change that plan on a dime, depending on who's in your class. Try to teach the class, not necessarily what you had planned. Remember that you want to open the front top of the chest wherever the hands need to be to do that. And you want to place the hands where the triceps are going to help pull the chest and the body forward. That's what helps to decompress the spine in Cobra Pose. So front top of the chest, lengthening, decompressing, and then slightly back bending in the spine, in the mid-back. That is Cobra. You're going to open the front of the body in Cobra Pose. Quadriceps, hip flexors, psoas, abdominals have to stretch to some degree. And the back body, if you really use your legs, reach back to the toes and press your thighs down. The back body, your hamstrings have to work, your gluteal muscles have to work. Your mid-back spinal muscles will also be working some, which is great. And then the muscles, again, in the backs of the arms and the backs of the shoulders, specifically your rhomboid muscles. And then if you don't drop your head, all the muscles of your neck have to work in order to keep your head from dropping to the floor. Right? So lots of great strengthening benefits for the back body in Cobra, opening benefits for the front body, and strengthening for the triceps, opening for the front top of the chest, and really such a great posture to decompress our spine for the health of those intervertebral discs. All right? If anyone feels compression in their lower back in Cobra, keep it smaller. Teach them how to use their arms to drag their chest forward. And remember, tell your students, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. So even if you can come up in Cobra Pose, that's a different posture. Even if you can come up higher in Cobra Pose, that's a different posture. It's more challenging to keep Cobra small. Yeah, I got to entice them. Entice them to keep it small. And lastly, about the hands, experiment, right? And take time once in a while to have your students experiment. The hands are not a set fixture, right? It's about how that affects the spine and the shoulders. And that'll change over time. You may want your hands way forward. You may want to be on your fingertips or your knuckles or hands wide. Keep experimenting with the pose because things change. Therefore, the position of your hands will need to change. All right? So, thank you for joining me for today's Cobra tutorial. It is a small back bend. Please teach Cobra Pose first before teaching upward facing dog, and in sequencing, sequence Cobra Pose first before upward facing dog because it's what warms us up. All right? So I will see you in another class. Practice with me here online or in another tutorial. Happy working on your Cobra posing, and I will see you again very soon.